Growing up, I would spend my afternoons watching Cartoon Network with my sister. It was so much fun. All these shows they had, they were total bangers. Ben 10, Samurai Jack, Powerpuff Girls, Dexter, you name it. Man, I miss those times. Things were so much simpler. No rent, no bills, no worries. My mom's food tasted so good. Now I live alone. And I eat pasta. Sometimes with ketchup. Anyway, there was this show that used to air on Cartoon Network. It was about a little boy that received a top secret robot made by a scientist, and for some reason, he wanted the kid to teach the robot how to become a nice little boy. That story alone is better than 99.99% of the shows they make for kids now. I'm not even overstating. Anyway, so I got a little nostalgic and I decided to model the robot to remember the good old times. After a few weeks of work, I ended up with this. This model has some interesting features like its antennas, the mouse, the jet flames, or the color changing eyes that can go from blue when he's happy to red like my bank account. Now you might ask me, why did this tiny model take so much time? Well, the thing is, in the show, the robot can transform into a bigger and more aggressive version. And I wanted to add that feature so bad, I even planned the whole modeling phase with that in my mind. That's why you're gonna see me add so many details to the model during the video. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it on time, so I had to make do with the normal version. But it's cool anyway. I mean, it has jet flames coming from its legs. How cool is that? Maybe, in the future, if I have time, I could try to add it. Alright, I guess you might want to know how I made this. Well, I have prepared this little time lapse about the whole process. Don't worry, I cut all the boring parts so you can enjoy it without any interruption. Also, I'll take time to explain how I made the special features in case you want to use it in a project or something else. And stick to the end for the bonus animation. I added timestamps so you can jump right into the tutorials if you prefer. And it starts now. It's quite easy to make these jet flames. First you add a UV sphere, then you scale it down and place it under the foot, as it's where it will be coming from. Don't forget to apply the scale. Now in edit mode, select all and scale on the Z-axis. You can then turn proportional editing on by pressing the O key to edit the tail to your liking. Now add a wave modifier, and if your mesh moves away it's normal. It's because of the wave modifier's default settings. When you press spacebar you can see its effect. Now in motion, uncheck Y and let's change these settings. It takes a little try and error to get the right values, but I have already been there, so I got you on this one. Now we don't want the top of the flames to be affected by the wave modifier, so we're going to create a vertex group and assign it to the tail of the mesh, so that the modifier is only applied to it. Now for the materials. It's a simple setup based on an emission shader and a transparent shader that we will combine using a mix shader. The factor of the mix shader is controlled by a mask node set on greater than, and it takes the Voronoi texture as an input. That will help us make the flames appear and disappear by controlling the threshold value of the greater than node with the driver. For the color of the flames, we're going to set it thanks to this color ramp. Also, don't forget to turn on bloom in the engine settings to see the glow effect. Now you can see here the black spots on the mesh appear when I change the threshold value. The reason is that I forgot to change the material settings. I'll do that in a minute. So we now are going to duplicate the mesh and scale it down, then place it a little higher and give it a brighter color to make the flames look more interesting. To create a new material from the original, you just need to click this little icon here. And if you want to see the second nuance of the flame, we need to change its blend mode to alpha blend and its shadow mode to alpha clip. We also need to change the blend mode of the bigger flame to alpha blend to get rid of the black spots. Now, the fun part. Let's add it to the rig. First, let's parent the duplicate to the original. So we want to hook it to the foot, but we also want it to follow the rotation of the foot. So what we're going to do is, in pose mode, unhide the deformed bones and duplicate one of the bones that is parented to the shin's deformed bone. In my case, this one will do fine. It could also be the deformed bone of the foot. So now let's place it just on top of the flames. It will help us add a child of constraint to the flame. Let's duplicate another bone for the driver. Back in object mode, select the flame mesh. Go to the constraint menu and add a child of constraint. Select the rig as target and choose the flame hook we just created as the bone. If it goes wild, just click set reverse and you're good to go. Now for the driver, select the flame mesh, go into shader editor, left click on the threshold and click add the driver and set it like this. Choose the rig as target and the driver bone we added earlier as bone. Change type to Y location and space to local space. Do the same for the duplicate. And that's it. Now you can turn it off or on command. One of my favorite features of this model are its antennas. It can be really helpful to communicate emotions in animations and also be useful for secondary actions. Let's have ourselves a small tutorial about how it was made. So first, let's add a UV sphere for the head and a cylinder for the antenna. The process here is that we're going to use Rigify samples to rig the antenna. They're like building blocks that we're going to put together to form our armature. The good thing about this method is that you get all the advantages of using Rigify. You can generate the rig and automatically have your custom bones. First, let's add a bone so we can have access to Rigify samples. Then let's go into edit mode and look for a simple copy bone in the armature tab. For this tutorial, let's just go with basic.raw copy bone for the head, the antenna and also the antenna controller. You can delete the first bone you added and replace it with a Rigify sample. Now parent each of them to the head bone. We can now generate the rig. Alright, since it's a mechanical character, we don't need to parent it with automatic weight. So we're just going to select the object and then shift select the rig. Press Ctrl Tab to go into pose mode, select the bone and press Ctrl P, parent bone. Do the same for the antenna and its bone. And we can now add the constraints. So first, we're going to add a damped track constraint. Let's select the rig as target and the antenna controller as bone. This is going to make the antenna follow the orientation of the controller. But we also want it to follow its location. So let's add a copy location constraint and set it the same way as the previous constraint. Let's reduce the influence so it does not follow it too much. Finally, we need something to stick the antenna on the surface of the head. And for that, we need to add a shrink wrap constraint and select the head as target. Let's also reduce the influence a little and we're done. You can always adjust the values of the influence according to the result you want. For the mouse rig, I first tried a grease pencil rig, but it was complicated to stick it to the face. So instead I went with the solution which was much simpler. I drew the images in Clip Studio and exported them with a transparent background. That way I can blend them easily with the base material. Here's how you can make it. First, select the part of the head on which you're going to display your texture and duplicate it and separate it from the mesh by pressing P. That's half of the work right there. Parent it to the head. Now select the mesh and go into the shade editor. The idea here is to proceed in layers. We're going to keep the base color which represents our base layer, and on top of it we're gonna put the image textures. Now let's add our image textures. You can select all of them at once, but make sure they are named in a sequence, so that the image texture node can slide through them like in the video. Also, turn on auto refresh on the node so that it refreshes each time we get to a new image. Alright, now we need to place these images on top of the base layer. For that, we're going to add a mix RGB node and a color ramp. Let's plug the alpha output of the image texture node into the factor of the color ramp and its color input in the color input of the mix shader. After that, plug the color output of the color ramp into the factor input of the mix shader. Finally, let's plug the color output of the color ramp below into the mix shader. You should have a setup that looks like this. Now, by changing the offset value of the image texture node, you can slide through the images available. Your image might look deformed, like mine. Here, and it's normal, because we need to tell the image how it's gonna wrap around the mesh. So we're going to UV and wrap it. On a simple plane like this, all you have to do is go in edit mode, select all the mesh and press U, and choose unwrap. Now if you go into the UV editing tab, you can place the UV map the right way, so your image is no longer deformed. The final part is adding a driver, so we can change the texture appearing by moving a bone. You can add a bone like I showed you earlier, and go to the shader editor and do a left click on the offset value, and click add driver. Feel free to set it the same as mine or according to your own project if you prefer. You can notice that when you go too much to the left or to the right, the image becomes pink. That's Blender's way of telling you there is no image here. You can add a limit location constraint to the bone so it doesn't go too far. There you have it, my friend. We went through every little secret this guy was hiding. And if you're still curious, you can go one step further and grab the model on my Gumroad. Also, there are going to be some changes on the way I share my models, because I now have created a Patreon page on which I'll be sharing all the models I'll make in the future. I'll also be sharing all my animation files, both 2D and 3D. Don't worry, it won't be a monthly payment, to avoid you getting debited on a month during which I would not make a model, for example. And I'm thinking about $5 or $6. We'll see. I'll still upload models on my Gumroad, but I'll set a price tag a little higher than on Patreon. The reason I do this is that I do put a lot of time and energy into making this content, and I'm really tight on budget and it gets complicated to keep up with everything going around. I'd love to be able to do this full time and not worry about anything else. Trust me, it's a little frustrating not to be able to unleash my full potential, because I know I can do so much more. But I have these bills around the corner waiting for me, so yeah, I still need a job. So your support is much appreciated. Anyway, I'm really happy about the channel's growth lately, and it really motivates me to work even harder and serve you the best quality videos. Cool stuff are coming to the channel, and if you want to be part of it, don't hesitate to subscribe. If you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up to support the channel. And oh, by the way, let me know what's your top 3 shows from Cartoon Network. And with that being said, see you next time.